Hello, Falcoholics. What is up? Welcome to another episode of the Dirty Birds and Brews podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Knight at Falcoholic. Kevin here to bring you the much awaited mock draft for the Falcons with trades. Yes, that's right. We're going to do a trade. If you listen to Wednesday's show, I spoiled a couple of things, but going to do and consider trades throughout this mock draft. And obviously, that is going to produce a different outcome. Probably one that will look a lot better because, as you guys know, the Falcons only have 5 picks going into the 2025 NFL draft. They got a first, a second, and then a fourth at pick 116, and then 2 7th-rounders, and that's it. So they're missing a third, they're missing a fifth and sixth. Those are, especially the third and the fifth even, like those are key depth addition type picks. In the case of the third, you're hoping that guy becomes a starter. So that's a lot of picks to be down. We'll see what we can do in terms of trying to work out some sort of, simulated, obviously, trade, but within reason, right? I'm not going to propose anything crazy here. I'm going to try to show you a realistic scenario where the Falcons could find a trade partner and move back. Yes, we're not moving forward. We're moving back. We're not going to try to trade up for anyone, not in this class, not with the Falcons' aforementioned issues. So we're going to be looking at a trade down situation from pick 15, and we'll see what sort of options are available to us. And then get some new players in here in the mock too, particularly in the mid rounds, some guys that haven't had a chance to end up here in Atlanta before. So we'll get to some different prospects too. So excited to bring you guys this post free agency mock draft, sort of getting into the nitty gritty of what the Falcons still desperately need to add. So we'll see how the Falcons tackle the remaining needs in this post-free agency mock draft. Before we dive in real quick, want to bring you guys a word from our sponsor, BetOnline. Folks, BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for betting on all of March Madness. That's right, March Madness has kicked off, and whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, BetOnline's your ultimate game day companion with the largest selection of odds on everything. College basketball, obviously, both men and women's tournament, NIT. They've also got a $200,000 bracket contest going on. BetOnline continues to be your number one sports betting source, and it's not just March Madness. They've got NHL, they've got UFC, boxing, all that stuff. From every Cinderella story to every hat trick, BetOnline's got you covered with odds, stats, and more for every game, every play, and every win. Make sure when you sign up to use our promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, to get access to the latest promotions over there on betonline.ag. BetOnline, the game starts here. All right, let's dive into this mock draft. The Falcons starting out at pick 15. And I think it's kind of an open secret that the Falcons really want to trade down here. If they don't want to trade down, I think they're pretty foolish. Obviously, that can change on draft day if something crazy happens and a player falls that they just feel like they can't pass up. But I think that's pretty unlikely to happen. Here, pick 15, probably not going to be any crazy falls happening. Like Abdul Carter, obviously they're not going to pass on him if he falls here or something like that. But I think there are, conversely, a number of players that other teams, particularly teams picking in the early to mid 20s, will be interested in. Depending on who you ask, wide receiver is pretty hotly debated about who's truly worthy of a top pick. And, there seems to be a lot of thought that maybe Luther Burden III isn't as highly prized by the NFL as some think. So if he's kind of not really in consideration for these teams at this point in the draft, that could push the value of guys like Emeka Egbuka, who seems like the NFL's higher on him than sort of the draft community is, as well as Matthew Golden from Texas. Those guys could see themselves kind of lifted up if Burden is moving down, because Travis Hunter and Tetairoa McMillan are going to go early. So if there's a situation where, let's say, one of Golden or Egbuka go before 15, I think we could definitely see one of these teams in the sort of early to mid 20s that needs a receiver, knowing that they can't wait. That guy's going to go at very soon after this pick 15. So that's sort of the scenario I envisioned here. I think there's other ones to consider, and we'll talk about those on future shows, maybe on the Patreon mock draft. We'll see what falls to us there. That's going to be coming soon, guys, so keep an eye out for that. But in this scenario, the Falcons are talking with the Chargers, and the Chargers want to come up for a receiver. They really still need one. I know they got Mike Williams back, but that's more of like a complementary piece. Josh Palmer last year was their wide receiver 2, and it was just not enough, right? I mean, Ladd McConkey, great rookie season, impressive player. I think I typecast him too much in the slot. I still think that's his best position, but he's played well on the outside and well in the slot for the Chargers. So good for him. He looks like he can be their wide receiver 1, but they really need someone else. Like, I think McConkey is an ideal sort of wide receiver 2 who can definitely function as your main target. That's why I think the Chargers going for a receiver here, if they really like Igbuka and they're comfortable with McConkey outside, which seems like they are, that could be a great fit. Or possibly they're looking for a field stretcher like Golden, and that could be an option here too. So the Falcons trade down with the Chargers to pick 22. They also send them pick 242, their late 7th rounder, to give the Chargers another pick, so they're not like losing too many picks, from a numbers perspective. And then the Falcons get 22. They get 86, which is the Chargers' 3rd round pick, and then they get 125, which is the Chargers' 4th round pick. Now, this is slightly below market value, depending on which chart you look at. If you look at the traditional trade chart, Falcons are losing a decent little bit of value here. If you look at the newer trade model, I think it's called the Rich Hill model, this is still a little bit below market value, but closer to market value. So I think that's fine. I think the Falcons would be okay with that in this scenario because they need the picks. The Chargers know they need the picks. I don't think the Falcons are going to be demanding a 2nd rounder or anything like that. This will be easier for the Chargers to accept. They don't blow up their day 2 entirely. They don't have to wait forever to pick again. So this is, I think, the best. It works out for both teams. The Falcons get those 2 mid-round picks that they're missing, essentially, and the Chargers get that receiver without having to risk those guys going before they're on the clock at 22. So now at pick 22, the Falcons are looking at a couple of different options because Malachi Starks in this simulation did go off at 21, which was really frustrating. The Steelers swiped him. And, a lot of the top edge guys are obviously gone at this point. I think there's going to be some edges that fall potentially, as well as maybe a corner like Jahdae Barron, but I feel like he's going earlier and earlier. So I think the Falcons go for one of the edge rushers that falls here. And this is a guy that I think is really underrated at this point. And that's not Shamar Stewart from Texas A&M, but Nick Scourton from Texas A&M, who going into the year was a top 10 type of prospect, coming out of Purdue, where he was elite for a couple of years, goes to Texas A&M. Texas A&M asks him to put 20 pounds on. He doesn't look as good. He doesn't look as fast, as flexible. He's still productive from a pressure standpoint, and still had a good season. It just wasn't dominant like we were expecting. That's caused him to kind of fall out of favor. Now, Scourton shows up at the combine at 267 or 257, one of those two, between like significant weight loss, right? And I think basically 260, we'll say. Shows up at 260 and, looks good. And I think he's going to test at that weight and test well. And I think that's Scourton's weight. Like, that's where he needs to play, where he looks faster, more flexible. And the thing with Scourton that I love is he is a polished pass rusher. He's got a deep bag of moves. He knows how to use them. I think he uses his hands really well. I think he could stand to get a little bit more physical as a run defender. I don't think it's a strength issue. Necessarily. I think it's, he just needs to get a little more physical with that. But he's got the bag of moves, even though I think his arms are slightly below threshold. They're just a hair over 33-inch arms, I think. And you generally like that to be like 33 and a half if you can, but that's not a significant deficit. That's just below. So I'm not too concerned about that. He's also only 6'3", but I think he's a very, very good pass rusher. And even at his high weight, he's still at a good pass rush win rate of 17%. I think he could get that higher. I think he's maybe the best pass rusher they can get. He's also refined. I don't think this is a guy you're going to have to wait 3 years to see rush the passer. I think if you want him to play all 3 downs, at a high level, that might be something that he develops into. But as a pass rusher, I think Nick Scourton's a great addition here. I think he's really underrated at this point. I think he definitely should be a top 20 pick. So I think the Falcons getting him at 22 is actually good value for him. Just watch the Purdue tape. I think the simple answer is that he was just asked to do something different at Texas A&M, put on all this extra weight. It's not his game. It's not who he is. He's a pass rusher. Let him rush the passer. Let him rush the passer at his natural weight at 260 and get back to that. I think that'll be a good fit for him, getting back to that style of play where I think he can have a good rookie season and give the Falcons that edge rush from the first round that they've been chasing for forever, right? Moving on to pick 46 in the second round. The Falcons get their pass rusher. That's great. I think they'll still consider D-line, obviously, at this pick and beyond, if guys fall to them. But one guy did fall that I just couldn't pass up, and that's safety Xavier Watts from Notre Dame. I know the Falcons just signed Jordan Fuller. I did do this mock draft. I made the mock draft earlier this week before the Fuller signing. I'm not going to change the pick. I don't think it matters. I think Jordan Fuller is a solid starting safety who maybe could be better than that, if this scheme that the Falcons are running is going to be more advantageous to him than what the Panthers had him doing. He was also hurt last year with the Panthers with that hamstring injury. It seemed like it bothered him all year. But I still don't think depending on Jordan Fuller being good is a great idea either, and maybe some combination of Fuller and DeMarco Hellams can be a good starting safety across from Jesse Bates. But I think long-term, you're still looking for an impact player there. And I think that's what Xavier Watts is. He's a little, he's not quite the crazy, versatile ball hawk guy that Malachi Starks is, who's just a more well-rounded player. He's not the crazy athlete that Nick Emanwari is, but Xavier Watts is basically just a really good safety. I don't think he's, top end size, athleticism, craziness, but he is a good ball hawk. He had 6 picks in 2024, 5 pass breakups, only allowed a 30.1 passer rating in coverage, which is crazy. He's almost 6 foot, over 200 pounds, good length. He did also play in the slot. I mean, I don't think he was as good in the slot as Starks was necessarily. But again, it's I think Starks has maybe a little bit more high end to his game, but I think Xavier Watts is kind of forgotten, and he's a guy you could get at a discount who could do some of the same things. The thing with Watts is I think he's more aggressive and his tackling isn't as good as Starks. That's the big thing. I think they could do some of the same things. Watts had tackling issues prior to 2024. I think they did get better this year. And I think his run support was not problematic anymore this year. It's just not high end the way I think Starks can tackle really well at times. And I think that Watts maybe has more room to grow as a run defender, as opposed to Starks being a little bit more pro ready in that regard, I think. And I think Watts is a little bit more aggressive, and to the point where it gets to be maybe too aggressive. And I think there's some boomer bust coverage moments. I don't think he moves as well as Starks. So if he does mess up, on one of his angles or jumps a route that he shouldn't be, he's going to have more trouble recovering than someone like Starks. But you're getting Watts at pick 46, and I think he can give you a lot of the same stuff, even if it's not quite the high end. I think Watts can absolutely still be a very good safety. I think he could be a good long-term partner for Jesse Bates. And, I think he is someone that will probably have a good chance to start, beating out Jordan Fuller, potentially DeMarco Hellams, and having those guys be your third and fourth safety. That's a really good deep safety room, I think. And that would be nice to see for this team, to kind of settle that position for the next few years, with a pick like this. So I do like his fit here in Atlanta. Moving on to the third round, this is one of the picks acquired from the Chargers in this trade down we did. Pick 86, and I had to sort of pivot, after Drew Dahlman was not brought back. The Falcons do need a center now. I don't think they're really going to be going into the year with just Ryan Newsel in there, whether they add a veteran or a rookie. They're going to do something else here. And this one just makes too much sense, right? Center Jared Wilson from Georgia. This is a good place to draft him. I think Jared Wilson obviously isn't very experienced, just a one-year starter for the Bulldogs. He's an elite athlete. We know that. His zone blocking on tape moves super well. Really pass protected at a high level too. Elite pass protection grades on PFF. Didn't allow a single sack. Just 6 total pressures on over 800 snaps. Really impressive stuff. He's not the run blocker that Drew Dahlman is. He doesn't really have the strength profile. I think Wilson's a better pass protector, but he needs to get stronger. He needs to work on his technique a bit as a run blocker. But as an athlete, he can run anything you want. Same as like similar to Dahlman. He can run any stuff. He can get to the second level. He can move super well. He's a great fit, obviously, in this offense. Really good long-term replacement option for Dahlman, and I think he's going to be a better pass protector, which seems like that's more important to the Falcons going forward. So, like this fit here in the third round, this is exactly the reason why Falcons could really stand to add a pick here, because there's definitely opportunity for them to get a contributor they desperately need for this year and beyond. At this point in the draft, they got to find a way to get that done. Moving on to pick 118 in the fourth round. This is we're going to go back to defense. That's going to be kind of a theme, right? Going back to defense, I was looking at the defensive line here along with the edge guys that were available. I like the D lineman better just because I like defensive tackle Jamari Caldwell from Oregon quite a bit. He's a little bit of an interesting prospect, right? He's kind of a unique nose tackle. He looked dominant at the Senior Bowl. One of the best, interior pass rush profiles from a nose tackle in this class. 6'2", over 330 pounds. He's got 32-inch arms, which is not ideal. That makes it a little bit difficult for him to stack up guys and fill multiple gaps. But I think in the scheme that I could kind of foresee the Falcons going with here, which is more of a hybrid front 4-3 under, where he might be the nose tackle in that 4-3 under, and they're just going back to a one gap sort of system. I think he's perfect for that. He could definitely dominate one-on-one, where he doesn't have to try to fill two gaps. He's really quick. He's got quick feet. I think he's got good burst off the line. He's a good run defender, and he can actually offer you some pass rush from that. And he's a good pursuit player, too. He moves well. He had a 9.3% pass rush win rate and batted down 4 passes, which, you would expect a guy with not ideal length to not be able to bat as many passes down, but he's looking for work. I love to see that. I do think the lack of length makes it so that he probably needs to be more of a one gap sort of nose tackle, where you're looking at more of a penetration style nose as opposed to just a space eater. But I think that would fit really well with what Ulbrich has typically done. And I think he is a good run defender. I just think he's more of a one gap run defender. And the thing with Caldwell also is that he can play up and down the line. This is not a nose tackle only guy. Because of his movement skills, he can just be a big player for you. So if the Falcons do bring in like another sort of run stuffing specialist nose, like either later in the draft or they sign a free agent and they want to have like sort of a jumbo like goal line package, or they want to have a real like run defense heavy front against certain teams or certain packages, you could have Caldwell play the 3 and put somebody else at 1 tech or 0 tech or something like that. And he absolutely can do that. He's got experience all up and down the line. I think he's a really good rotational player for you. I think he's a guy that can play as a rookie. And I think he's a good fit for what the Falcons could be doing. We still don't know exactly what it's going to look like under Jeff Ulbrich, but I'm excited to see what Caldwell could do. I think he's really interesting, and I think his pass rush profile as a nose tackle who also can stop the run kind of gives him an edge over the other guys that you can get like later in the class, where he can be someone that actually does provide some pocket pushing and some ability to rush the passer, even if you're in an early down front, which is important for teams that like to switch it up and like to run a lot of play action and do a lot of stuff like that. So love Caldwell. Really interested to see what he could do here in Atlanta, if we can get him here. Next pick, we got, this is the other pick we got from the Chargers in that trade. This is pick 125. The one thing that we haven't addressed, so far we've addressed the hole at edge rusher. It's far from done, but at least we did something there with the first round pick. Then we filled the safety hole next to Jesse Bates, hopefully long-term with an impact player in Xavier Watts. Then we filled the center hole with Jared Wilson. There's one spot that they really haven't been able to address yet. A couple spots, actually, but one of them is slot corner. The other one probably be linebacker, depending on your opinion of Divine Diablo. But with the Falcons spent money at linebacker, they didn't spend anything at slot corner yet. So I think at this stage, they're looking for a slot corner in the draft, clearly. And I think this is a guy that I know Trayshawn got a look at the Shrine Bowl. cornerback Elijah Huzzie, who is one of the most impressive players there. He's small. He's not quite 5'10", but very close. But he is 193, so he's a thick slot, feisty defender. Doesn't have great length or anything like that, but he looked good at the Shrine Bowl against a pretty good group of receivers there. He started all of 2024 on the outside, but spent all of 2023 in the slot. He's definitely a slot guy in the NFL. I like him. He's feisty, doesn't shy away from contact at all. He's a ball hawk. I think he had 11 pass breakups in 2024. And he's had picks every year, but I think back in 2022, he had 6 picks as well. So that he's a ball hawk too. So that's the Falcons kind of adding 2 ball hawks to the secondary alongside Jesse Bates, who we know is already that for them. They're adding a lot of playmaking and a lot of takeaway potential with these guys. Going to be kind of boom bust, at times, right? But I think that could, that might be exactly what this defense needs to actually find a way to be serviceable, is if they can take the ball away, if they can capitalize on mistakes, even if they're not a great down-to-down defense. Maybe if they can create some turnovers, give the ball back to the offense, maybe that's a winning formula for this team as we're kind of trying to build this defense, because we know it's going to be a multi-year project at this point. So that's an identity, at least for them, maybe an opportunity for them to kind of capitalize on some mistakes. It's maybe it could work, right? But I think also, this is good value here. You can get a guy that could start for you in the slot. I like Huzzie a lot. And so that's another addition that I think could pay dividends for the Falcons early. And it seems like he'll basically be walking into a starting job, or at least have an opportunity to compete with somebody else that the Falcons add. Probably at some point we'll see a slot corner added. All right, so last pick here is going to be round 7, pick 218. This is the final. These 7s have been moving up and down based on projections, but these should be the final picks now, folks, because the comp picks have been awarded, so there shouldn't be any more shuffling outside of trades. And we traded pick 242 to the Chargers, to give them another pick, and so that I didn't have to make another 7th round pick. It's mostly for me, but I think the Chargers would appreciate that, right? But I think the Falcons do really want to add a developmental right tackle. They haven't extended Caleb McGarry. I think that was one of their best ways to clear cap space. And to me, that signals that maybe they're not really comfortable committing to him as Penix's blindside protector, which, again, if they're sort of shifting this offensive line to be more pass protection focused, not as much emphasis on the run game, it would make sense that you're not going to commit to Caleb McGarry, because his biggest contribution is as a run defender, and he's just kind of solid as a pass blocker now, which that's certainly something that he's grown into, and I've been impressed with that from McGarry. But I think here in the 7th round, you're looking at maybe a guy that you can draft and develop. And the Falcons have had some success with that approach over the years, right? Ryan Schrader was a great example of that. So it might as well take a shot. I don't know if this guy's going to be here. To me, he seems like a guy that's going to go earlier just because of traits. But if he does last this long, offensive tackle Hollin Pierce from Rutgers, I think is super intriguing. He's 6'8", 344, 36-inch arms. The Falcons love length like that. He's one of the biggest players in the class. I think he moves pretty well. I think he performed well as a zone blocker. But, with that height, that size, there's limitations there. And I think he's got a lot of work to do with his technique. I do think he improved a lot as a pass protector this year. He did a good job. He graded out really well, actually, as a pass protector. So I think this is a guy that's well worth taking a shot on. If the Falcons had a 6th rounder, I would consider taking him there too. So I think this is an intriguing guy, has the movement skills, has the build, has the crazy size. If you're moving to a little bit of a more pass protection focused line, maybe you're fine with just having this mountain of a man out there to cover Penix's blindside, and maybe he's just a swing tackle for you, or a guy that you're going to develop for a while. But I think he's well worth the price tag here. With this 7th round pick, you're probably looking at a developmental player, maybe a return specialist, maybe a depth linebacker, a special teams linebacker, something like that. But I think developmental tackle, they clearly want one. They've really been looking up and down the NFL for guys. They have basically the Brandon Parker, kind of a similar prospect to Hollin Pierce. The Falcons are looking for these guys. They're trying to develop someone. I think this is another one to add to the mix for sure. I like Hollin Pierce. I think he's really interesting, and probably is going to go higher than this when the time comes. But that's our mock, guys. So instead of 5 picks, the Falcons end up with 7 or 6. End up with 6 because they got 1 extra pick because they got 2 but traded the extra 7. So they end up with 6 picks here, but they sort of improved one of them dramatically from a 7th up to a 4th, and they add that all-important 3rd round pick that they were missing, and they still get, I think, a very good edge rush prospect at pick 22. And I think there's definitely other guys that could fall there that are very interesting. So I think they're going to be okay trading into that range. I wouldn't want to go too much further than 22. I mean, maybe 25 would be sort of like the floor. I mean, you're probably looking at getting a 2nd if you go that far, which would also be nice. But I think this is a good sort of situation for the Falcons. They get those important mid-round picks that they're missing, and they get some really key contributors that really are going to help this team a lot. I think this is, again, this is much more of an instant impact class than last year, but there's still a lot of long-term upside here. I think all these guys have long-term upside. Wilson in particular, it wouldn't shock me if Nuzul beat him out, given Wilson's limited experience. But I think Wilson, again, very similar to a Drew Dahlman, may take over at some point this year for Nuzul. He'll be the backup and probably will be the starter going forward after that. So this could give him sort of a soft landing in the NFL. Could continue to get more experienced. I really like that fit too. So real quick to recap, we got in the 1st round, pick 22, edge Nick Scourton from Texas A&M. Get that edge rusher in here. In the 2nd round, round 2, pick 46, the Falcons take safety Xavier Watts from Notre Dame. 3rd round, this pick is from the Chargers. The Falcons grab center Jared Wilson from Georgia. Get your dog in here. We got round 4, pick 118. That's defensive tackle Jamari Caldwell from Oregon. Round 4, pick 125. This one's also from the Chargers. Cornerback Elijah Huzzie from North Carolina. And then finally, round 7, pick 218. Offensive tackle Hollin Pierce from Rutgers. So let me know what you guys think of this post-free agency mock draft for the Falcons, guys. I do think, I think it covers a lot of ground. I do think the Falcons will be really tempted to double up on edge, for example, and maybe do some other stuff. This one was a little bit more, let's see how many holes we can fill. The Falcons may be more focused. They may be more focused on defense. Maybe they add a veteran center and we don't worry about Jared Wilson. I don't know what they're going to do. Maybe they wait, shuffle some things around. But I think it's a fascinating look at what could happen if the Falcons are able to pull off the trade down, which I think they're going to be working hard to pull off that trade down. So this is just one potential outcome of a trade down here into the low to mid 20s, which I think is probably about what they're looking at. But yeah, let me know in the comments what you think, guys. Give me your own mocks. If you want to do a mock with these similar parameters with this trade, find out who you get. I use the PFF mock draft simulator. You can't do trades without being a member. But you can always just set yourself to pick for the teams. You could set yourself to pick for the Chargers and just make Falcons picks with those. That's what you can do, just saying. I like it though. Trevor Sikkema, who runs their draft stuff, has added a lot of profiles to the simulator as well. So you can read more about the guys while you're drafting, which is a lot of fun, very informative as well. So definitely check them out. If you haven't liked and subscribed to this video yet, this would be a great time to do that. The subscriptions in particular help the channel grow and help us get out there. So appreciate everyone who's done that already. Thank you guys so much. Follow the show, Twitter, Falcoholic Live. I'm Falcoholic Kevin Knight. You can support the show on Patreon. It's patreon.com/Falcoholic Live. Also, join up with the channel memberships on YouTube. We appreciate that. And yeah, we'll be back next week with some Tuesday takes with Trayshawn early. Then we're going to continue to have some more guests coming on for Falcoholic Live as we get closer and closer to the draft itself. We'll see if the Falcons make any other free agency moves. If Kirk ends up getting moved before the draft, there's a lot to cover. It's going to be a busy month ahead. So looking forward to covering it with you guys. And thanks again, of course, for watching the Dirty Birds and Brews podcast. We'll see you next time here. Thanks again, of course, to BetOnline for sponsoring today's episode. Have a great day, guys.